So once you've actually sorted out all the planning sections, we then need to actually conduct the research, collect the data, and collate that in some way. So the good thing about Google Forms and SurveyMonkey and most other free survey generators is that they will collate your data for you into spreadsheets or tables or graphs. But what you need to actually do is then think about, is it telling you what you intend? So you might have wanted to get people's opinions on underwater knitting and why they are so good, why it's such an appropriate sport for the Olympics, and you've got 100 people's different sentences that explain this process. Now that's great, except you now need to actually work these out into groups. What are the top 5 reasons? So you might need to actually manipulate the data. The other thing that you might want to do is to actually journal the process of conducting your survey, because at this point you should be reflecting on what was successful, what was challenging, and what worked well, what things didn't work as well. So once we've done that, we then need to actually annotate the data and conduct our formal source analysis to actually look at, is our sample biased? Is it credible? Is the data that's coming out actually appropriate for our circumstances? So when we're thinking about these different sections, it's really important that we're thinking about all of these different sections and not just focusing on the end point, which is the data, but actually preparing properly. Okay, so what we've got here is a survey example, and what we can see is that this student is looking at the impact of coral bleaching on tourism in Queensland. So this topic is appropriate for a survey because we're going to be able to ask people about whether they are changing their thoughts about tourism in Queensland because of coral bleaching. So a couple of things that we can see here. This is what we were talking about with the introductory statement. It's really important that you have really clearly indicated the purpose. So what are we researching? You should definitely put that in, like your question, and what ethical conduct you're adhering to. So we're only going to use it for RP, we're not going to manipulate it anyway, we're going to be anonymous. If this was a topic about a well-being issue, it's just something to think about, because you've got participants who are involved in your research and you've got to make sure that you are protecting them. So if you are asking questions about well-being, you might potentially include the links to services such as Lifeline or Beyond Blue, or you might put the disclaimer that we often see on television shows when they're about mental health issues. If engaging in this survey has brought up any issues for you, please contact so and so. So we've covered our purpose, we've covered our ethics. One of the things I always strongly recommend is that we have a variety of question types. So if we have a look at this survey, we can see that we have a range of questions in that we have, very simple, yes or no. Okay. What's really important is that from that question, we can now delineate answers of people who have been to the Great Barrier Reef and those who haven't, and therefore treat those data samples separately if we need to, because I would imagine that for this person's research, if they have been to Queensland, they're going to feel very differently about the Great Barrier Reef than if they haven't been there, and that's really important for us to consider. We then have a multiple choice with a variety of activities, and what's really important whenever you have multiple choices is that you give an option for other, because I have skewed my data into 4 categories now. When I look at this, I would be basing those off of my prior research, but I need to make sure that I've actually really clearly laid them out to represent everyone. How can I be sure I've represented everyone? I put in an other tab for them to add to it if they really want to. The other thing we'll see for this one is numbers, but more importantly, we've got a really clear quote.